Arnold! 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 Move it, football head! Hey, Arnold!
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Movers Podcast, the off-topic podcast for Avatar The Last Airbender Online.com. This is going to be episode 46 for the show Hey Arnold, and we're recording this podcast on March 5th, 2017. I'm going to be your main host for the podcast, Morgan, Airspeed Prime, site super moderator for Avatar The Last Airbender Online.com. Joining me first on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
And also joining us is Kelly, Gemini530 from the site.
Hi, everyone.
Excellent. So that's our team for today. And the format for this show is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to quickly do our what we've been watching, playing recently segment, and then we'll get into Hey Arnold after that. So what have we been watching, playing recently? For me, the main thing I want to talk about this time is just that, I think like I said in the last Movers podcast, I'm continuing my rewatch of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, which is obviously the third Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, the card games on motorcycles thing. I'm about 90 episodes in at this point, so I've gone through most of the arcs that people rate as being like really, really good, and into some of the stuff that maybe people don't like as much. I still think it is the best Yu-Gi-Oh! Series by a long shot. There's actual like plot, not just like kind of situations for the card game to happen. There's actually a decent plot, a lot of interesting characters, and yeah, I'm really surprised rewatching it just how good it is compared to like original Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, which I'd also fairly recently just watched as well. But that's really been about it for me. But Greg, what have you been watching or playing recently?
Let's see. What have I been playing? Well, I haven't been playing anything, but I've been watching other people play, Horizon Zero Dawn, which looks really awesome. I think we might have talked about that a long time ago, and everyone getting their Nintendo Switches has been pretty interesting to watch. But as far as what I've been watching specifically myself, still watching Dragon Ball Super, which is now getting into sort of the next sort of tournament arc, which is pretty cool. And the only other thing I've been watching is I've been watching season 2, or attempting to watch season 2 of iZombie.
Mm-hmm. And Kelly, what have you been watching, playing recently?
I wish I would be playing Horizon Zero Dawn right now, but that's currently at my home, not on campus, and I have way too much to do to start getting into that game, but I'm super excited to play that. Like, that's like on my like top priority radar, along with Persona 5 with games coming out, which Horizon's already out, but I'm probably not going to play it until later. But as for what I am playing, still an occasional Overwatch here and there, because honestly, I just keep playing that game. Like, you know how other people were with Destiny? Like, Overwatch is like that with me. Like, I just keep playing it. I like all the competitive seasons and the arcade modes, and now they have custom mode, which I'm trying to understand, because it's, like, really, really crazy. Like, you can do, like, I don't know if you know about this, but you can, like, make really crazy things where, like, one person has a bunch of health, and it's, like, 6v1, and it's like people have made Predator-style games, and, like kill Winston, and, you know what I mean, like, with, like, soldiers or something. Like, really interesting combos, which I haven't figured it out, but it sounds like a lot of fun. And I also just, again, I have so much to do, but I stupidly did this. There's a game that was on sale. I don't think it's on sale anymore. Yeah, it's not on sale anymore, so sorry to the recommendation. But there was a really good game called Titanfall 2 that came out last year. It's like a first-person shooter game where you ride giant robots. And I was like, ooh, and it was like really cheap. on the PlayStation Network. So I was like, oh, okay, I actually kind of was interested in this last year, so I got it. And there's a story mode, which they said the first game didn't have story mode. So I was like, okay, I'll play the story mode. I won't actually beat it though. I'll just play like a couple of hours of it or whatever, and I'll give it a shot. I just beat the story yesterday. The story is very short, like 4 hours. So I was like, that's kind of dumb. But I mean, the game's meant to have a multiplayer focus, so I'll get to that in a second. But the story was surprisingly sweet. For the 4 hours of an FPS shooter with giant robots, because where it's like just super violent, like. And then at one point there's time travel, and you're like, this makes no sense, but it's cool. So that's a lot of fun. I actually do remember. I mean, I do recommend looking at it, but only for like a cheap price. Don't get it for like $60. Stupid. It's not worth it in that regard. What else have I been doing? What have I been watching? Well, first of all, Greg, that's cool that you're watching iZombie, because season 3 comes out April 4th. So that's exciting. I can back Greg up on the iZombie, because that show is great. What else? Oh shoot, what was that show? Broadchurch season 3 is out. I have not seen it. I want to, but that's something I'm planning on watching. This is always that thing where at the end of the podcast, once we're done, I'll be like, I forgot about this, and this. And this, so there's quite a few things I'm doing. Chef's Table is a good documentary on Netflix, and that's all I got.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that I'm obviously continuing to watch Naruto Shippuden, which is just 3 episodes from coming to the end before they switch over to doing the Boruto anime. So episode 497 aired this week. There's 3 episodes left, and then they're going to switch into the Boruto stuff. So that's pretty exciting to see such a long-running show kind of come to an end and see how they do with the new stuff. But yeah, from there we'll move into our main topic for this week, and that is discussing Hey Arnold, which we're doing here today as a kind of listener suggestion podcast. And the way we did this one is that instead of just watching the first 2 or 3 episodes of the show, instead what we did was we each chose one episode and reviewed them. But because of the type of show Hey Arnold is, we'll mention them and discuss the episodes, but it's kind of going to be more of a general Hey Arnold discussion, kind of remembering the show type thing, rather than super focused just on the 3 episodes that we did pick. So for anyone wondering like what episodes to watch, so you get more context for the discussion, the episodes that we chose were, Greg chose Season 1, Episode 13, the first half of the episode, so 13A, the subway, or Das Subway. I chose Season 1, Episode 17, the second half of the episode, 17B, the Sewer King, and then Kelly chose Season 3, Episode 1, the first part of the episode, Helga Blabs It All. So that's 3 episodes we're going to discuss, but for the most part we're going to be discussing all of Hey Arnold. So a brief idea on this show is that obviously it's a Nickelodeon show that ran from 1996 to 2004. And there was a theatrical movie that came out in 2002, and then there's going to be a TV movie at the end of this year that kind of completely, I suppose, wraps up the story kind of plot of Hey Arnold. So that's coming out like really, really late after it was meant to. In terms of the show itself, there's 100 episodes, which comprise basically 185 segments, which obviously means there are certain episodes which are 22 minutes long, other ones are just 11 minutes. And the general way of describing this show is it's a slice of life, primarily comedy cartoon, which just focuses on Arnold and like all of the people who surround him that he lives with, his friends in school, and just the normal and then most of the time unusual things that happen around in his life. And then the main creator of the show is Craig Bartlett, who is even doing the movie that's coming out later this year. So let's start with general thoughts. I suppose it's just going to be kind of general thoughts on Hey Arnold, and then we'll discuss the 3 episodes later. But Greg, just in general, what are your memories of Hey Arnold like? How much do you like the show, I suppose, looking back on it again now?
I still like it. I mean, I remember watching it when it came out in '96. I was probably around 9 or 10 then. So I pretty much saw it from the beginning. I can't remember if I perfectly watched it in sequence, since this is something that, you had to like run home to see on TV or whatever time it actually sort of aired. But no, I really, really enjoyed it watching it while I was growing up. And even rewatching, I watched probably like around probably 5 or 6 episodes to pick my specific pick, and then I watched both of yours. So I watched a good amount to sort of, rewatch and get used to it again. So no, I really still enjoyed it. I mean, it's pretty much just as fun as I remember. It's nothing like heavy or something too serious or anything like that. Like there's no from these episodes, there's no sort of like crazy overarching plot or anything like that. But it's just a fun show that you can watch, individual pieces and sort of enjoy it on its own, sort of as a standalone sort of segment things. And you can sort of think about the characters and just think about how it was if you were a kid in sort of those sort of crazy sort of situations. And especially if you're from like a sort of a city, or you live by the city or whatever, it's always cool to see kids in sort of an environment that you're sort of used to sort of acting out sort of their daily sort of extraordinary lives. So I think it's a really cool series.
Yeah, like I also remember kind of growing up watching this show. I probably realistically growing up have seen every episode of this, but I definitely haven't seen them all like in order, or like I never knew which episode was what, like what season was which really. It was just whatever episode was on TV at the time. So like I don't have like great, like I don't remember every single episode, but I remember like specific things, specific characters, and kind of what happened, like who like this character was focused on in this episode, and then just the kind of general, really odd at times kind of tone to the series, that it could have like pretty mundane episodes, but it could also have really kind of crazy episodes, as the kind of, I think, 3 that we kind of discussed get into various aspects of the show. But overall, watching it again, I think it's still as fun as it was in the past. It definitely kind of, like, each episode feels very unique, and even though they do at times deal with kind of just like very slice of life type things, the way they approach it, like from a kind of like 8, 9-year-old's perspective, it makes even just like going on the subway like a kind of event. Like, we're not doing this, are we? And it's made to be a big thing with how dramatic they make the music at times and so on. So I definitely like the show a lot. It's one of those ones I doubt I'd ever go back and rewatch it, like episode 1 to 100. But I'd pick out like, oh, that's an interesting idea, I'll watch that episode type thing. But that's my general thoughts on the series. But Kelly, what are your kind of opening thoughts here on Hey Arnold, looking back on it?
Yeah, it's really great looking at the show again. It's a show that I've always meant to just rewatch episodes of, but never really got around to it because I did watch it a lot as a kid, kind of like classic SpongeBob, you know what I mean, or Fairly Odd Parents. Like, a lot of these episodes are pretty embedded in my brain. If I were to click on one of the episodes listed or whatever, I would watch the first minute of it and remember the rest of it. You know what I mean? Like, I would remember how the rest of it goes. I always loved this cartoon as a kid, and it surprised me how much it stuck with me as an adult. Like, that it's just a really well done cartoon. And how it stayed well done for 5 seasons. I think it had 5 seasons. And as you were saying, it makes the mundane or like simple concepts seem really fascinating through the mindset of 9-year-olds, you know? And as someone who grew up in an environment like similar to Arnold, like I didn't go to public school, but like where I lived kind of looked like his house, and things like that. Like it was just like I could relate to the show a bit, you know, even though I was a very isolated kid. Like I was pretty like introverted, still am, but when I walked outside, it felt like that, you know what I mean? So it was fascinating to see a cartoon based in an environment that I could recognize, and still be interesting, you know, it's weird. Like, you would think a show that looks like this would be really boring, but it has a lot to it, like really good writing. It's not like the animation's top notch or anything, but the character designs are really unique. And we didn't really pick episodes, each of us here. We didn't really choose out episodes. I mean, they're really fun, and they're entertaining with concepts like, you know, like the sewers, the subways, or like all these other things. But like, I also have to emphasize that this is honestly one of the smartest and most message-filled kids shows too. Like the messages that some of the episodes would have would really hit home, you know what I mean? Like really meaningful, thoughtful, philosophical stuff for 9-year-olds. You know what I mean? Not all of them. Obviously, you have the Sewer King, which is just a crazy sewer adventure, but like but there's also episodes where Helga, one of my favorites is like a 30-minute long one where Helga finally like she goes to see a psychologist and they start to understand why she is the way she is, and the episode after the one I chose, where Harold learns through his dream by his mistakes and learns to work hard for what he wants to do. It's like really like good concepts for kids to know while also being fun. I think cartoons should be like that more often. I think they don't give. I think today cartoons don't give kids enough credit. Well, they're getting a lot better now with Gravity Falls and Star vs. Forces of Evil. They're getting better, but there was a period of time where cartoons just didn't give a lot of effort in showing things from a kid's perspective while also teaching them a lesson. They just kind of threw something colorful in their face and expected you to get something out of it, but there's nothing to reach for. And what's sad is that Nickelodeon is the biggest perpetrator of this when they once had Hey Arnold. So
yeah, like it does speak to the like Nickelodeon's kind of ups and downs, and that like Hey Arnold and like other shows that they had around that time, like Rugrats and stuff like that, were really good, and then basically from like when Hey Arnold came to an end up until like relatively recently, you'd really say that like Avatar and Korra are the only kind of like standout Nickelodeon shows since then. Everything else has been like kind of Kelly alluded to, a lot of just very basic shows, even like they're kind of slice of life, more comedy sitcom type things, still not having the same sort of like kind of maturity message to it like Rugrats even had, Hey Arnold had, and so on. So it definitely speaks a lot to that I suppose Nickelodeon are trying to recapture some of what they had with finally like bringing back and like allowing them to finish the show with the TV movie that's coming later in the year and so on. So it's definitely interesting. But I suppose on that topic, Greg, did you have any thoughts on that? Just the kind of like the era of Nickelodeon that this is in compared to like where we are now and what this represents?
Yeah, no, it definitely is interesting that you both sort of bring that up, because it definitely was. I don't know. It definitely seems like there was a point in time where a lot of kids cartoons definitely had meaningful sort of things that can sort of, help kids sort of understand just sort of the world around them, or just, be able to interact with it in a different way and actually sort of teach them various different things. And it definitely seems like Nickelodeon, at some point sort of, lost sight of that, or they just had, sort of different goals with where they were sort of, attempting to take their shows. And this is, one of those, I mean, it's kind of sad to think that it's like a relic of the past, since it's not really that old per se, but, just one of those things of where they used to sort of, like Kelly said, they used to sort of try with their sort of, stories and, try to live up to something different. So it is interesting to see, how they're going with that, and the fact that they're bringing it back with a movie. I remember when they sort of announced that a while ago, that was like, I don't know, it was sort of odd that they sort of would bring it back after all these sort of years, but, that's still pretty cool that they're willing to do that, or maybe they're just think that maybe going back to that would be something interesting, since all of us are now older now and we're sort of still thinking about those shows. So I guess it'll be interesting to see how that actually produces and how it actually comes out. But yeah, it definitely is something to take note of, how the cartoons in general have sort of changed over time.
Yeah, it's like one of those things like SpongeBob, I believe, still has the same format of like each episode is 2 separate segments, and like a modern episode of SpongeBob is just kind of relatively like mindless. It's just an episode and things happen. It's just SpongeBob being SpongeBob, and there's nothing really to take away from it. Whereas the majority of Hey Arnold episodes, there's usually some sort of unique thing to it that makes it, either fun or meaningful. But I suppose at this point we'll get into the episodes now and kind of quickly go through them. Then we can start talking more about characters and stuff like that. So the earliest episode in the series that we're doing is season 1, episode 13A. So this is technically like the 25th episode overall of the show, 25th segment. And this is the one that Greg chose. So I suppose, Greg, what led you to choose this one of all the episodes as your pick?
Yeah, it was, I don't know, there's so many episodes of Hey Arnold that I had to sort of, look around to sort of think of, what are some good episodes or what are ones that are some favorites of mine. I think for the most part, like Kelly said, as soon as I started watching the five, different episodes that I downloaded, that I was able to pretty much remember most of what happened in each of the episodes, for the most part. But for this one specifically, I actually had two different ones that dealt with the subways. And living in New York City and in cities in general, the subway is just one of those things that you're always always around. Is your main mode of transportation. So I don't know, for me it was really cool to sort of want to pick a specific subway episode, and this one was, I don't know, I always sort of liked this one just because it had sort of a nice message of just seeing people trying to make the best out of a bad situation. And if you ever have been on the train and stuck underground for any sort of period of time, you can sort of relate with what the people in this episode are going through. So that always sort of struck home to me, even just from the beginning, how they say just don't take the subway after after night. Is what was it, sun goes down, stay above ground. I thought that was just one of those sort of funny sort of catch lines that they have in the show, that almost every other episode has some sort of quotable line in the episode. So I thought that was really cool. So no, it's just one of those episodes that I sort of remember, and I think that was has a pretty positive meaning towards it at the end.
Yeah, like I like the setup of this episode of just they all go to see a movie, they come out and it's later than they expected, and they're all like, our parents are going to give out to us because it's getting towards nighttime and we're not home yet. And so they're just like, the only way to get home reasonably okay and not get in trouble is to take the subway. And as we're kind of talking about here, the fact that they are so relatively young, the idea of taking the subway without their guardians, parents around, is just this kind of crazy adventure for them. And some of them are super on edge when they're on the subway, and they're freaked out by all the adults around them. Some of them are kind of like oddball type characters, and it's just really fun to see how something actually does go wrong with the subway, but how they just freak out to an insane degree, whereas realistically it's just, okay, there was a fault in a public transportation system, it happens, it's bad, but it's not end of the world type thing. And they just make a big fuss out of everything. There's a few rats on the ground, we're surrounded by rats, and just little things like that kind of really get across this is what Hey Arnold is. It kind of a lot of the episodes are taking the bus, taking the subway, something crazy happens. But Kelly, what are your initial thoughts on the subway episode that we watched?
Yeah, I remembered this one. I'm not gonna lie, I watched the wrong episode at first, so I had to quickly look back at the subway one, and I remember it pretty clearly. And he didn't know that always stuck with me too. I didn't take the subway when I was a kid, but although nowadays it's much more common, people don't care. They, you know what I mean? I feel like when the show came out, it was very taboo for kids not to take the subway when it started getting dark. But now times a change. Not that it's still not. People still recognize that taking the subway at night is just a generally more scary atmosphere. That is true. That hasn't changed. But not to the degree of them freaking out over the subway stopping. Because nowadays it's just please hold. You know what I mean? It's our train is held due to train traffic. You're just okay. you don't even care. But I guess it's different with them because the power went completely out or something. But so as a kid, that always freaked me out. So I guess, I don't know, I guess maybe that was a message that probably wasn't good. But it was a fun episode either way, because I always thought it was really funny how the adults tried to keep themselves calm and collected, and then they start freaking out, particularly the scene that always frustrated me but also made me laugh when I was a kid was when Helga was freaking out in the center. She was big open spaces, and it becomes a mantra, and the psychologist is slowly losing it, and then he starts freaking out. The comedy and the editing of that was really funny, but it also frustrated me too because of the repetitiveness of it. I was the psychologist in that moment. I was oh my god, shut up. But it's to me, I always liked the episode because it was funny, but especially with the grandma. Oh my God, the grandma.
Mm.
I love this grandma so much. She's honestly like one of my favorite characters. But what I liked was at the I don't know. Are we doing different points now? I don't want to just review the whole thing.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Bring up a talking point about this first episode. Yeah.
Okay. Um, I guess just these minor characters that we don't see again, other than the hobo. I swear I've seen that hobo in other episodes. I just don't remember where. But the other characters we don't see again.
Yeah, like we get a good few interesting characters here. A woman who has claustrophobia, her psychiatrist, kind of hobo homeless man, kind of on the train who kind of claims that the train is like the car is his home and stuff like that. We get a kind of a nurse who doesn't seem to freak out for most of the episode, which is kind of thing with the show where like most of the characters that we meet are oddballs, and it's all the like kind of weirder characters who are the ones freaking out. Whereas I think the implication with the episode is that everyone else on the train is actually perfectly fine. It's just normal, but the kids and some of these weirder characters that they meet are the ones that are like freaking out. The blind man and his dog and stuff like that. It's an interesting kind of blend of characters as just the kids who obviously we know as the main characters have their own unique personalities, but then we get to see the just random people on the public transportation system just and how they interact with them, and it's a fun one just to see that kind of dynamic play out. But Greg, what are your thoughts on some of these kind of more new characters that we don't really see again in the episode?
Yeah, no, I think the show does a pretty good job, despite, a lot of the characters that you meet in the episode besides our sort of core group of kids and our set, like boarders and, some teachers, most of the characters that you meet since they're in sort of a city environment and it's just so huge are pretty much throwaways. So I think the episode does a good job of, for our oddball characters, giving us a good idea about sort of their personalities and sort of, why they're, sort of as weird as they are and how they sort of, will function in this sort of crisis that sort of happens here. So I think it's interesting just to see how they decide to sort of, pick and choose the characters and how they play them off of the kids, since, everything is around the kids and sort of how they're reacting to their environment. So, how the kids view sort of the other people around them is how you can sort of understand these other people on the train cars, like the people who think, Helga's such a cute little girl to, the lady behind next to her who has, the claustrophobia issue. So it's interesting just to see how these, other characters, other adults usually are viewed towards from the children's viewpoint.
Mm. Yeah, I suppose my talking point with this episode would just kind of be that we do get to see a little bit of kind of some of our main characters and what their kind of personality is, and some of their unique aspects come out in that. Gerald, for me, from what I remember, is always the kind of like the street smart one who always kind of he's the one who knows all the little like suburban legend type things, and so he has the line about when the sun goes down, stay above ground and stuff like that. He seems to be that knowledgeable one, and so they just give him command over like which subway transfers they take, and he just gets it completely wrong because it's I suppose it's meant to be some sort of a jab at how confusing the subway system is. Being from Ireland, we don't have a subway system, so I'm really like, is that a joke or not? Is that a reference? I'm not really sure, but you get that. And then Arnold, as I think we see in the next episode as well, the one I chose, he's kind of just this kind of like optimist. Like, even though that there's this kind of challenge, he's just like, we'll take the subway. What's the problem? As everyone else freaks out, and he's just like, okay. And then when the dog, something's up with the dog, he's the one who kind of draws everyone's attention to that, kind of highlighting that, yes, he's the main character, and one of his kind of traits is that he kind of sees a problem and kind of tries to solve it himself, and him and the nurse kind of help the dog to give birth to the puppies, and that's the kind of thing that calms everyone down and brings them together. Just this kind of initial issue with the dog, but then it turns out it's just giving birth. So I kind of like that we got to see a little bit of most of our characters, and like we see Helga, that even though usually she's kind of presented as like, okay, she's obsessed with Arnold, but acts as kind of like a very kind of almost competent, aggressive character, but here we just see her like panicking drama central, and it's just very fun to see that. But Kelly, what were your thoughts on how our kind of main characters were in this episode?
I thought it was pretty interesting. I mean, it was pretty in character because often with Helga, like she does kind of put on this facade of toughness, that like she's really tough and whatever to deal with her problems. But we know that that isn't 100% her. Like she is aggressive. Like you can tell she's genuinely aggressive because every time the kid with the glasses breathes behind her, she just knocks him out. But Brainy, that kid's name was. Like when it comes to her like not having fears or whatever, like she does, and it was interesting to see how someone who's always so like you're not tough, blah blah blah, just completely freak out like in the like for like something so silly like rats and like just being stuck on the subway. She's just like, why? Like she's her dramatic side was showing, the one that she always hides to be all poetic with Arnold. She was doing the dramatic side with being stuck on the train. I just thought that was interesting because we normally don't get to see like different sides of Helga while Arnold is there in the presence. You know what I mean? So it was funny to see that. And with Gerald, him knowing the saying and liking folk legends and stuff, I always found fascinating that he was a very cautious character. Often it's Arnold who wants to go do these crazy things, and then Gerald's like, I don't know, Arnold, I don't think we should be doing that. Like, I don't know, like, it's weird, like, thinking back on it. I'm like, Gerald was often not really for a lot of the things that Arnold wants to go to do, but, they're still friends anyway, and he's the one that knows all the crazy stories, so it's his fault for telling them, Harold being Harold. Like I don't even know how really I don't really even know how to describe that. Obnoxious, curious, just kind of a kid, who likes chocolate. Like I don't know, like they're very defined. Like, and they're not so tied to their specific personality traits that it's like the equivalent of Patrick is dumb or Squidward is mean. It's not like that simple, but it's simple enough that you can expect who they are when you see them, because you're like, oh, that's kind of something that they would do. But then often the show surprises you by having episodes that expands beyond that, and we learn more about the characters as individuals in their own individual episode. So I don't know, that's just kind of another another point I have with the show in general. But it's great seeing them do what they're doing here. Phoebe seems to not really do a lot in this episode, which is weird, but she's usually the rational, smart one. So, yeah, and Arnold is Arnold. I mean, how do I describe Arnold? Like, he's usually calm, but sometimes he could be outspoken about, like, he's like kind of like the Katara, like he's preachy and like the good things you should do, kind of like doting over others, and in a sense, not like motherly, but in the sense of like giving advice to those. Like, he's like the sage. He's like a child sage, even though he himself isn't perfect, and I think that's really fascinating.
And Greg, your thoughts on the main characters?
Yeah, no, I think you do get to see a good bit of their personalities, how they would act in sort of like a normal type of situation and how they work in sort of a extreme sort of situation, which is what this is. So I think the show, does a really good job, especially in this episode, of just showing, them at probably, one of their more sort of, lower or just, worrisome sort of points here. I mean, even, like we mentioned, Gerald, how usually he doesn't really want to do, sort of the crazy things, but he's able to sort of, help out Arnold in most of these situations. This is one of the situations where, like he got them into it, but, even him had, some issues when everything was sort of falling apart in this episode, as many of the other characters, except for, Hey Arnold, of course. But no, it's really, it's really good just getting to see them in this sort of environment. And I think pretty much every episode where we see them, especially when we see them as a group, I think is really cool, because when they interact and sort of bounce off of each other, you get to see even more of their personalities than sometimes when you see them sort of alone and sort of hidden. So no, it definitely does a good job in this episode.
Having not remembering everything about this show, it was kind of like interesting to see that, like, oh yeah, they are still all friends, even though at times it kind of comes across like there's like friend groups, and like that some of them maybe aren't necessarily friends with each other, but that no, they still do go to like the cinema together and stuff like that. That was nice to see. But I think the only thing left is just, we do get a little side plot with Arnold's grandmother kind of seeing the news about the issue with the subway, and her basically making it her mission to fix it, and she kind of gets into her like army clothes, it goes into her like army mode. I can't remember if they ever really explained it within the show, like why she is that way, but it was definitely like her thing that they did. That just she usually just comes across as like a kind of like funny old character, but then she's one of the most like capable characters when she actually sets her mind to doing something, and it's usually like her trying to be a hero, and like you see her do like yoga and stuff like that in the background. But Greg, what are your thoughts on Arnold's grandmother's involvement in the episode?
Yeah, no, I think she's great as she almost always is in this episode. Just, seeing, this little old lady just sort of jump into the, fatigues and sort of hop on the top of the train to sort of, get the car sort of going. I think it's just sort of, fun in itself just to see this sort of, extreme situation that probably wouldn't happen in real life, but, they can make it happen in this sort of cartoon and, have it make some sort of sense. So, no, I think that was definitely really, that's always a fun part, getting to see her in action.
And Kelly, your thoughts on Arnold's grandmother here?
Yeah, I've always loved Arnold's grandmother. She's just crazy, but like in every best way possible. And I always thought it was I don't know, I just always thought it was crazy how many things she like knew how to do. When it's, what it's like when you have like an older person or a grandmother or grandfather say they know how to do all these things, or like they like have been on all these things and adventures, and you're kind of like, okay, and then it's like seeing that, but like they actually do know how to do these things, and they are really crazy and like cool, you know what I mean? Like it's like taking those stories and then making them real, like her being karate master and knowing how all these things work. Yeah, no, I always liked the grandma. Her voice actress was always really entertaining too. By the way, she's Hama. if you didn't know that, Bloodbender Hama, same voice actress. She's really talented, Jess McNeil. But yeah, no, good stuff. I love the grandma.
Yeah, like I like even at the end of the episode where they do the song, which is just another weird aspect of like the show, that there are these just weird things where like it'll come to a normal conclusion, and then they'll just turn the weirdness up again, and just like the homeless man leads them all in this like song about their experience on the train, and they all like join hands and sing, and they kind of they pan back from the train, and Arnold's grandmother is just sitting on top of the train as it's moving and stuff like that. It's just the weird quirky aspects of this show that make it like really fun and weird. But we'll move on to the episode I chose, which is actually only like 4 episodes after the one we just discussed. But there's not a ton of continuity really within the show, so it's not like we needed to do like multiple episodes in a row. But the one I chose is the Sewer King. The reason I chose this one was because I wanted to choose one of the more kind of really weird episodes where like they kind of touch on one of those kind of urban legend type things, and this is the first one I think that came to mind, so I just went with it. Really, what all I remembered from this was obviously the kind of Sewer King, Rat King guy, and then the emphasis on the watch within the episode. Watching it again, it was fun how it's just this idea of Arnold is given this what he feels is like a super important kind of mission to just get his grandpa's watch back from the jewelry store after being cleaned, as if it's like his grandpa's like greatest treasure, and like he commits everything to it, and it ends up not being that big of a deal, that he just made it this kind of crazy thing when it maybe didn't need to be. I think that's always an aspect of Arnold that I seem to remember, that at times he can like turn simple things into unnecessarily like big, like important missions. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on the Sewer King episode?
Yeah, I remembered this one when you had picked it. Like I was like, oh, this one, oh, this is going to creep me out. I don't know why this episode creeped me out. I guess I've just always not been a fan of sewers and like what could be living down there. And like I'm not afraid of rats or anything, but it is all pretty gross, you know. So the idea of like a man living down there is just you know what I mean. Like it's a funny and weird episode, like you said. And I'm glad you picked an episode that had a really weird premise, because as the show went on, not that its first season didn't have weird episodes like this one, obviously, but like as the show went on, you know, eventually they started running out of ideas, and they would do some really weird things. Like not every episode would be that grounded. Monkey Man I always thought was quite a fascinating one. But
I was gonna pick that one.
oh really? Yeah, Monkey Man. Such a funny one. But what was I just saying? Now this episode, it weirded me out, but yeah, I agree with you. No, Arnold makes it a bigger deal than it actually is. The ending of this episode is honestly really good. Hey Arnold also often, not always, some episodes end just kind of like meh, but Hey Arnold tends to have a really good way of ending episodes. Like other cartoons just kind of like just let it end and it's unsatisfying. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I guess it's the end of the story. Yeah, all right. But Hey Arnold always did a really good job, for the most part, at ending episodes pretty well, and I really like the ending of this episode. I always thought it was really funny, and anticlimactic. I don't know. I was just like with Arnold. I was like, wow. But really, really good episode. I don't love it. I could think of a few other episodes I like more. I guess I am more I like more of the grounded episodes a bit more. Not that I don't appreciate when it goes a little crazy, but I felt like this episode went a little too crazy. Like watching it again as an adult, I'm like, yeah, a lot of these things don't really make sense, and I like to believe that there's like some sense of reality to Hey Arnold. You know what I mean? So, I like the episode. It's a good episode, but it's not one of my favorites personally. I have a lot more that I like.
Yeah, like there's other like weird urban legend ones. There's like the Pigeon Man episode, which I think is actually like a really good episode from what I remember. I don't remember too well. There's some bit of a Ghost Train episode which I remember being quite interesting, and that's another one where they kind of
That's the one I watched by accident. I thought that because I thought of Subway and Train, so I watched the Haunted Train episode, which is a very good one.
Yeah, and then like they ended on the note of like, no, there actually is a ghost. If I remember correctly, they show the ghost at the end, but our characters never encountered it, only we as the audience see it. But Greg, what were your thoughts on the Sewer King?
No, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I don't know, sewers, especially living in this city, is one of those things that there's always like so much, sort of, I don't know, talk or whatever. Like even, the rumor that there's, alligators in the sewers, the fact that there could be sort of, a sewer king, as a kid, doesn't seem as crazy as it potentially sort of could be. I mean, there's tons of rats and stuff down there already, so why can't there be, some crazy person down there? But no, overall, I like the episode. I mean, I think it's pretty cool, just like in many of the episodes, to see Arnold and Gerald in tow sort of go through such crazy extremes to get something that of course in the end probably isn't sort of as important as you probably sort of think it is. I mean, just the whole fact of this whole that the whole sort of joke that this whole goes sort of straight to China is such like a older sort of funny sort of type of joke that may not be as popular nowadays, but when the show came out, that was like a pretty sort of common thing to sort of joke about. So it's interesting just to see, sort of think back to when this show sort of aired originally in the times and how much has changed since then. But no, overall, I think this is it's one of those fun sort of weirder sort of episodes that despite it being so weird, does have a neat sort of message at the end.
Yeah, like I think one of the parts about this episode I remember the best was just the joke of the fact that everyone knows the specific watch, the name and the details of it like perfectly, and it makes the watch feel so important. Like I even wrote it down. It's like Schnitzen powered Time Master 909 with the Swiss Polar Align triple synchronous movement escapement. I'm pretty sure they made that up, and that's not actually some sort of like watch technology that's like notable. That just seems like a bunch of words that roughly relate to watches like put together. But just the fact that like Arnold knows about it, and then Gerald comes up to him and says the exact same thing, I thought was a pretty funny joke. And then the Rat King becomes obsessed with it, mainly calling it like a royal icon. And then the reveal at the end is that Arnold's grandfather has like 16 of this exact same watch, and he can just replace it at any time. I thought that was just a kind of brilliant way to do it. And like as kind of Kelly said with the end of the episode, the fact that Arnold put so much effort into this to like make sure he got it back because it's the prized possession of his grandfather, and then he's just like, oh, you have more of them. It was completely throwaway. I didn't really need to put that much effort in. And they kind of ended on just like 10 seconds of him walking to the store to get milk as like a more mundane mission he's sent on. But Greg, what are your thoughts on how like the watch in a way is like the MacGuffin of this episode?
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great sort of, tool to use as this sort of MacGuffin of the episode. I mean, like you mentioned, how everyone sort of, seems to know that is so sort of iconic a watch. It just, it lends more importance to it than it probably really is. I mean, it looks like sort of a simple sort of ordinary watch, but the fact that they're able to sort of name it and the fact that, even in the beginning of the episode, they sort of, they hype it up so much with him, saying that, you don't even trust, grandma with this, but you're going to trust, me, your 9-year-old grandson with it. It makes it, really interesting. And, you can see how, not knowing, the whole sort of scope of things can, make you think things are more important than they really are. And especially, with these, with them being, kids and everything, everything is sort of, blown out of proportion. So no, I thought that was a really good sort of way to sort of, push the episode sort of along. And you can just pretty much tell from the beginning that something is going to happen with this watch. Like he put so much effort into, saying that nothing, can happen with it. But, of course something does. So, it's not something that's so sort of crazy that, you won't see it sort of coming. But, it's nice when it actually does happen.
And I kind of like how they set it up that like his grandfather kind of did say, well, you're 9 now, you're getting older. Like this is a kind of like prove that you're like becoming mature enough to do these things type stuff. So like his grandfather kind of didn't help the whole situation by like making it feel more important than it was. But Kelly, what were your thoughts on the use of the watch here as our kind of like plot device, basically?
Yeah, I really liked it. I agree with you. I thought it was really funny how they knew the name of it, like the really long name. It's like, why would these kids know? Why would these kids know the name of a really long pocket watch? Like things like that are really humorous, like they don't make sense, but like they don't make sense in a humorous way, and I think that was really funny. And then obviously the reveal at the end. Actually, no, it's even, we didn't even say that was even funnier than the reveal. Is that he drops the watch in the garbage disposal and ends up back with the wrecking. Like Arnold just went through like heck to get to the fiery pits of like the heck to get the freaking watch back, and like it goes right back to where he like got it. Like I don't know, I just thought that was really funny. It doesn't really make sense though. I don't think the sewers connect that way, which is the kind of things I mean when I say like it takes me out of it a little bit when like it takes leeway like that. But like it's a show, it's a kid show, you gotta have some leeway, obviously. But just the fact that like honestly, why does he have 16 watches in his kitchen drawer? Like what is the purpose of this? Like it to me that's hilarious. Like he just there's a bunch of ticking watches. Wouldn't he hear the ticking? Wouldn't the ticking, like, how does the drawer hold all the ticking sounds, like, in the kitchen? And it's just like, why are they there? It's I don't know. I just thought that was particularly funny, and yeah, just it's good stuff. And then at the very end of the episode, I just thought was really great when he's like, I'm gonna just go rethink my life. It reminded me of this common meme from Rugrats where Stu is mixing pudding, and he's like, because I've lost control of my life, which is like a funny like meme from Rugrats. I don't know if you know about that, but it reminded me of that. And just the fact that he's like, can you get milk on the way out? And he just puts his thumb up in the air like, yep. Like, very relatable, grounded stuff. And you're just like, with everything he just went through, it's a good balance of the stuff, of the relatable to the crazy.
And yeah, so the only real other topic about the episode is the sewer king, the rat king himself. Really kind of unique character because yes, with the way they kind of color his skin, it's clear that he obviously hasn't been out of the sewers in a very long time. They do the whole afraid of light thing. He relates to rats, but they also make him this like really intelligent character who like plays chess a lot and seems to be really good at it because they obviously present Arnold as like a chess genius. And then like he's this guy who's capable of doing things like swinging from a rope and like catching two boys going down this kind of waterfall type place in the sewer system. So he's clearly quite like agile and stuff like that, and I suppose has even gone as far as to like actually train rats to like do things for him and like bring stuff to him and so on. So it's this kind of mix between like what you expect and that like he's a super intelligent guy, but he's in such a weird position as like the sewer king and like calls it like a royal icon and really believes he is actually like a king. So it's a funny blend of a character here in that you sort of like instantly question like, how did this guy end up down here in the first place? How did this happen? Like, you sort of want to know an origin story, but the whole point of Hey Arnold is that, like, this character's only in this episode, we're never going to see him again, and we just have to, like, think about, like, how on earth this happened. But, Greg, what are your thoughts on the Sewer King?
Yeah, no, he definitely is a oddball type of character, and just the fact that he thinks he's in some sort of royal sort of kingdom, and even the fact that Hey Arnold, at least in the beginning, he chooses to play along with it because he sort of sees the situation that he's in. I think is just fun in general, and just the whole idea of the chess, is just randomly there sitting next to him, and he hasn't played anyone human in quite a while, and he seems to know all these terms and these famous sort of chess players, and Hey Arnold just doesn't really say anything, but just sort of quietly sort of challenges him to a game to sort of win the watch back. I think is interesting in itself, just sort of how they set up this character in such a short amount of time. I mean, it does a really good job of making you sort of you don't know everything about this character, you don't know sort of his history and his sort of backstory, but you get his idea of what he is, why he's sort of down here in the sewers, and just sort of how he sort of lives his life. So I think they did a really good job of making that sort of whole thing sort of fun and entertaining for this sort of really sort of if you really think about it, this creepy sort of person that sort of lives his lives in the sewer, sort of getting trinkets from his sort of trained rats is sort of odd, but the show makes it interesting in sort of a fun way that you can sort of somewhat relate to a little bit.
And Kelly, what were your thoughts on the Sewer King, the character?
Yeah, he weirded me out as a kid, and seeing it again didn't really change my mind on that because how he weirded me out as a kid. But I mean, I agree with you in that often Hey Arnold has these one-shot characters that you're like, what's their story? You know what I mean? Like, you want to see Pigeon Man again or Monkey Man again. You want to see these people again. And you most of the time don't, because the show has the creativity to come up with new ideas instead of reusing old ones. So that's kind of interesting in itself. But the fact that he's just down there. He obviously only has the rats to talk to, and he's for some reason really good at chess, even though he has no one to play with. It's interesting. Creepy, but interesting. I don't really have many other thoughts on it. He's a good dilemma, I guess, for them, but it's just like, what? Like, it's just the weirder aspects of it, because you don't get a backstory. It would have been interesting to get, like, a quick backstory. Like, I fell down here when I was 9 years old, and you find out he's, like, not all that different from them or something like that, but who knows?
Definitely. But that's that episode. So we'll move on to the episode Kelly picked, which is Helga Blabs It All. So why was this the episode that you chose, Kelly?
It was really hard for me to pick an episode because I really like a lot of them. I actually even really like the half-hour episodes, but because we were picking 11-minute episodes, I was like, fine, okay. For one, you guys picked like season 1 episode, so I was like, okay, I want to pick one from a later season, a season that I watched more, which was like 3 and 4. And this one focused on Helga, who's my favorite character, and you can argue is sort of the pseudo protagonist of the show. Like, the show is about Arnold, sure, but like, Helga's even the one who talks in the theme song, and often the show focuses on her almost just as much, if a little less, but you get my idea here, right? She's like the second main character, even though like she's the antagonist in some episodes. I always thought she was a fascinating character, and I just wanted to have an episode that was a really fun episode with her that, of course, address, because again, you guys chose 2 episodes that didn't really address the whole like her liking Arnold thing, and this one like really addresses that, so I was like, okay. And I just think this episode's really funny, like really well written. And again, Helga's one of my favorite characters, and it's interesting to see the inside of Arnold's house outside of Arnold's perspective. Like, she's sneaking into his house and all the craziness of the residents and like her having to get around it. I don't know. There's a lot of episodes I would have loved to pick from. Now that I think back, it's like, oh, maybe I should have picked one with like a really good message. But I always loved this episode as a kid, and even watching it again, it was really just great to see all these characters do crazy things again. So, yep.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad we had a kind of Helga-focused episode, because definitely from what I remember about the show, she is definitely, I think, the character who gets the most development, because Arnold kind of just is the same. You could say he kind of learns stuff in each episode, but it's never like to the point where like it changes his character. But like with Helga, she has a lot going on, and that like you get like development of like her and her father. I think is a pretty big thing. Her and her sister, and that kind of rivalry that's pretty much only on Helga's side. And I think you get little bits and pieces with the mother. And then of course
there's two really good episodes with the mother, like two really good ones.
And then of course Helga and Arnold and how she feels about him is a consistent thing that obviously is what this episode is focused on. And yeah, I really like it that they just kind of have this episode where she's like under the influence of like laughing gas and commits to telling him, and then the second she finishes sending the message, she snaps out of the laughing gas and realizes that she has to get it back. And it becomes the kind of Helga the Commando episode, as she kind of has to like infiltrate the house secretly and get the tape message. It's a simple concept of just that like somewhere in Arnold's house there is a phone with an answering machine, and she just needs to delete that message, and what she has to go through, the people she has to encounter to get there, and how she goes about doing it is really, really kind of interestingly done. And obviously it ends in a really funny but very kind of fitting way of just like it kind of had to end that way, didn't it? But Greg, what are your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, no, I really liked this episode. I definitely remember this episode. So when I started watching it, I could remember pretty much for the most part what was going to happen. But yeah, no, this is good just to see, another side of sort of Helga and just sort of how she, how she deals with her love for Hey Arnold, and how she's so sort of, committed to it when she has, under the influence of the laughing gas. But as soon as it's over, she, realizes what she's done and, sort of, goes into the mode of just sort of trying to fix it the best way that she sort of can. And I think it's just fun just to see her on sort of a solo mission for the most part, and how she sort of interacts with the house and the borders and just everything, and even how she sort of has to go sort of Mission Impossible on this to sort of get the tape back. I think is a really sort of fun episode that just shows another side of her in general. So I think those episodes are always really cool.
And it's a nice contrast as well to like the first episode we watched, where like on the subway she freaked out about basically everything, but here there were so many moments when she could have freaked out. Even at the end, like there's a spider on a web, and I think in the subway episode she mentions that she doesn't really like bugs or something like that, and she just like bowls straight through it because she's nearly at the end of the mission. So just all that sort of stuff, like that. Season 1 Helga might have freaked out about all this stuff, but this is such an important thing to get back. She has to focus on the mission. But yeah, really, really interesting. But Kelly, I suppose, what's the first kind of talking point about the episode you want to bring up?
Yeah. Talking point. Okay. I guess. Let's get to the basis of it first, like why she's doing what she's doing. And this is, again, sort of an overall general point of the show, but the idea of Helga's complete admiration for Arnold and how she changes her personality based on the situations of that, including in this, like you said, she is fearful of these things, but she's like, nope, don't care. Arnold cannot know. Let's go. You know what I mean? Like, like serious, like how she gets really serious about these things and poetic with all these things. And I know it's not like 100% the focus of like what's going on in the episode itself, like what's happening, but it's still an aspect of the show that's obviously important. So
yeah, like it's really interesting where when she is under the laughing gas and she's just talking to the dentist with like obviously no inhibitions, and she basically just says that like she's been obsessed with Arnold for like 6 whole years. That she says like she's 9 now, and like for the past 6 years she can't stop thinking about him. So it's just like, wow, like this is a really big kind of part of her life, and like you can tell how much it kind of means to her. And so the idea of him actually knowing this in the end, and how overboard in a way she went on the laughing gas and mentioned it over the call, you can understand why she really doesn't want to kind of have it properly come out in that sort of way. And yeah, it initially comes across kind of as a more of a kind of comedy gag maybe throughout the entire series, but you do realize throughout the Helga episodes that it is actually like a really like important aspect, that she really, really does kind of like Arnold. It's just she can't quite bring herself to tell him, of course. So that's just really interesting. The little bit of backstory on her kind of crush on Hey Arnold that we do get here. But Greg, what are your thoughts on the basis of the episode, being that Helga likes Arnold?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely an interesting sort of aspect. The fact that we do sort of, get a mini sort of backstory, like you mentioned, is interesting just to see, from her perspective, sort of uninhibited, sort of her real sort of thoughts and feelings on sort of Arnold and sort of how she goes straight to, just sort of at this moment at least, sort of, wanting to sort of tell him all about it. And, she really, really does sort of care for Arnold in general. I mean, one of the other episodes that I watched was Arnold's hat, where she sort of takes it and then she sort of see how much it sort of affects him, and sort of goes through sort of a similar sort of crazy mission to sort of get it and bring it back to him. So she definitely has very sort of serious sort of feelings for him, that she just can't really sort of bring herself with everything that sort of has going on in her life in general, sort of bring herself to sort of tell it. So it's interesting just to see sort of, how that plays out, in this episode and through the series and as a whole. Is one of those, running through lines that sort of, keeps the series together. Just sort of her her fondness of Arnold in general.
Yeah, and it's also one of those like shows that like in many ways kind of like I think for a lot of people almost invented the whole idea of like when you have a crush on someone, you instead act really mean to them. Like this is one of those kind of situations of that instantly comes to mind, because it's so like over exaggerated, the fact that like Helga's always pretty like usually like mean, rude to Arnold when she's around him, around other people, but when she's on her own, she's like obsessed with him and really cares about him. So really interesting stuff. But Kelly, any more thoughts on this?
No, you guys pretty much brought some really good points on that. Pretty much how I feel the same way. And just in general, like not specifically this kind of situation, but I thought it was pretty relatable how the episode started. Like when you're on laughing gas and you're just like talking because you can talk, you know what I mean? Like it went a little crazy, the fact that she would like get up and make a phone call and no adult would stop her. Like they were just kind of letting this happen and laughing, which I was like, these people are cruel. Like now that I'm older, I'm like, wow, wait, I don't remember how mean this was. But I guess at the same time, it also shows how much they don't understand kids. Like, you know what I mean? They're just like, oh, kids messing around, and her whole life was just ruined by that. You know what I mean? So, well, potentially, that's like her point of view. So, yeah, like I thought that was kind of relatable, like the kind of stupid things you say or do when you're like under laughing gas or whatever. And just, yeah, and with her crush on Arnold in general, we do learn more about it as the show goes on. I actually forgot that it was revealed about her, like how long she's had a crush on Arnold in this episode. I had forgotten about that, because there's an episode in season 5 that addresses the whole thing, and whenever I think of that, that's the episode I think of. If you guys haven't seen it, it's Helga on the Couch. It's honestly one of the best episodes. It's a 2-parter. It's like 23 minutes long, and it delves into Helga's like personality and how she is the way she is and what she's dealt with, and it's like really fascinating. So watch that one, please, if you watch the show. No, it's just it's always been a source of humor for the show, but it's also just the core of Helga's character and her duality, her juxtaposition, how she's so angry toward Arnold because she can't say any of these things, and because of the frustration she has at home. So she's like, I have to take it out on somebody that I know will probably stay the same no matter what I say. You know what I mean? That kind of thing, So it's fascinating to me. It's a kid. This is a kid show, and it has like really layered stuff. Like it's why Helga's my favorite character. It's because like even though Arnold is great and the other characters are fun, Helga kind of has more layers to her than other characters, and she has development, like you said. So yeah.
I suppose the next talking point I have about the episode is it was just a little part in this episode, but it's an interaction I do to remember in other episodes. That is Helga's friendship with Phoebe, and how it's kind of this idea of like she can just call Phoebe to do basically anything, and she'll do it for her because it's Helga, and that's kind of the dynamic of their relationship, that she'll just do anything for Helga. I don't really remember the exact like if there's an origin for like why that is the case, but I definitely remember episodes where like they would kind of bring this up, that potentially Helga's at times taking advantage of Phoebe and not kind of being as good a friend to her back, like given how much Phoebe actually does for her. But just seeing her here, like, oh, what's gonna happen next is gonna ruin the plan completely. So it's just like last resort, call Phoebe, and she just darts out of the house, bribes the ice cream man to come round the neighborhood again, and it was just a really kind of funny kind of distraction that like I have not really remembering the exact details of the episode. I thought, oh, Phoebe's just gonna come over to Arnold's house, knock at the door, and like talk to him, and that would distract him. But just the idea that she bribed the ice cream man as a way to distract them was just really funny. But Greg, what are your thoughts on that? Just a little bit of Helga and Phoebe's kind of relationship that we get here.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting to see, these two interact with them, sort of being best friends, but, Helga at times seemingly sort of taking advantage of her in the same sort of way. Is interesting just to see that. And, they definitely have, a pretty deep friendship, and there are different sort of episodes that, delve into that, I guess, a little bit more, just, in different ways. I mean, there was one other episode where Helga has the whole sort of like comedy bit, and, she messes up her relationships with a lot of her other friends, and Phoebe's sort of like the voice of reason. So it's always nice to see, Phoebe in an episode, because she usually, she does a pretty good job for the most part of sort of balancing out sort of Helga's sort of craziness. So it's definitely nice to see, Phoebe sort of just, jump into action in this episode, which, a lot of times she doesn't do quite as much as Helga does.
And Kelly, your thoughts on Helga and Phoebe's relationship?
Yeah, I always really liked it. I'm actually glad you brought that up because I probably would have forgotten to. One of the episodes I almost picked was actually an episode that dealt with Phoebe and Helga's relationship, but I realized it was more of a Phoebe episode than a Helga episode. It was the one where Phoebe gets hit by the bus and breaks her leg because she was doing so many things for Helga. She wasn't looking both ways, and Helga felt so guilty. She was like doing everything for her, so she faked to keep her leg broken for longer so Helga would keep doing things for her. And it was like a big flaw in Phoebe. Like she wanted to take advantage of Helga, like Helga took advantage of her, and it was like a really interesting episode. But again, it was more of a Phoebe episode, but that's another one that I really, really like. And yeah, you're right. Like often Helga would just like, contact Phoebe or talk to Phoebe and should pretty much do anything for her. I don't think we ever get an origin story as to why that is the case, but it's still a solid relationship because it's weird because it's true that Helga takes advantage of Phoebe, but you often also see that Phoebe does want to be around Helga. It doesn't feel like she's being bullied, even though she's being taken advantage of. It is a little weird, you know what I mean? Like you can't quite understand like why Phoebe is with her. I guess she just genuinely sees her as a friend. She knows the more sensitive side. If I had to say a reason behind this, I would say maybe Phoebe found out about Arnold, which we know she knows, by the way. As the show goes on, Helga always says like, ice cream, and she's like, okay, ice cream. Like Phoebe knows that Helga likes Arnold, but like they don't discuss it head on. I would imagine maybe what could have happened was Phoebe like found out and Helga was like about to pretty much kill her, but like Phoebe was just very trustworthy and very loyal to her, and so they were just friends. I don't know. It's a fascinating relationship. The fact that she bribes the ice cream man is really funny, and she's smart. Like Phoebe is really smart. Like I really like her character. She's not in the show a lot, but when she is, she either does nothing or she's like a huge contributor to what's going on in the episode. It's kind of a weird thing with her. It's like she's there and she's just there, or she's there and she's a really interesting character. So I actually remember, if I'm correct, the last episode of Hey Arnold, or like the second to last episode production wise, was actually focused on Phoebe before the show got canceled. So like it was a really weird thing to end the show on Phoebe, if that makes sense. Like it was a Phoebe focused episode, and that was technically the last one, kind of like Terra and Teen Titans or whatever. But yeah, that's a thing about Phoebe. Fun fact. And yeah.
Greg, do you have a talking point about this episode?
About this episode. I don't know. The only other thing I thought was interesting of this episode was just seeing sort of all the guys together and just sort of them sort of, the idea of them, sort of coordinating to sort of get this go-kart, and just sort of, how this sort of messes up, Helga's sort of, plan to sort of get the sort of tape back, and how, of course, in the end, eventually she just sort of flat out, ends up in front of all of them, and, nothing really sort of comes of that. She just is able to sort of escape out, quietly somehow.
Yeah, I love that moment where I think it's that the guy the guy Helga punches every time kind of appears behind her. He just kind of randomly says like, let's have our meeting right here in the hall, and like there's no reason whatsoever for them to have the meeting in the hall except that it would hinder Helga from doing what she needs to. Just the little things that like everything is going wrong for Helga in her mission to get this tape out of the way. But yeah, just the fact that like Arnold's room, like we don't really see it in these episodes, but Arnold's room is this kind of like crazy thing that he has like all this gadgets and stuff like that in, and well, like the way the kind of fold out kind of couch that Helga comes in on works and stuff like that. He's got a really unique room, and how in the end she gets the tape but falls into the room, and I like how she just is just like, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm literally just gonna back out of this room, not say a word. No one's gonna say a thing to me, and that's it. Everyone is just like, what just happened? The door shuts, and they're like, okay. Like they didn't even care that Helga landed in the room. They just weren't going to ask. And I kind of like that. You think it was all gonna lead to some crazy moment of Helga getting caught, but it's just an awkward moment, and Helga gets away with it, and then gets gets chased away by the campfire lasses as a kind of retribution for her actually beating up a girl in this episode. So definitely some kind of fun things here. But I suppose, Kelly, what are your thoughts on that side of the episode?
Yeah, all the obstacles she has to face is really funny. Like you said, just having them meeting in the hallway just cause. Kind of similar to the, what was the other thing we were just talking about earlier? Oh, I can't remember, but there was a similar thing where, just the idea of, like, he has 16 clocks in his short for some reason, you know what I mean? Like little things like that. That's really humorous. Things that just keep getting in her way. It's the quieter. It's weird because this episode has a lot of dialogue. It's not like it's silent, but when it is silent, when a lot of the physical humor is happening, like it's really tense. You know, like she has to like climb up walls and like when she did that thing where she put her feet on the wall and her head on the wall. I used to do that as a kid all the time. I don't know if that's just me, but I used to do that for fun. And then she slid down and fell. Like I was like, oh man, I used to do that all the time. I don't know. That just was weirdly nostalgic for a very tense hiding scene. And the end of this episode, oh my god, I think the end of this episode is honestly why I picked this episode. Because when she just slips through the couch covered in dust with the tape in her mouth, and just everyone's just like gasps, and they're like, what? It just okay, can I bring this is sort of a talking point, but it's about in general. I'll get back to it, I swear. The music and sound design of the show is top notch. Like the kind of the jazzness, the tense, like high, like I don't even know what instrument it was that was playing when she was like slowly backing out of the room. It was just like it's like really like tense, and you don't know what's going on. It's really awkward, and she steps slightly over the guy's legs, and she misses the doorknob the first time she's going for the doorknob. She's like looking for the doorknob. It's Hey Arnold does the little details the best. You know what I mean? Like the little things. Like they could have just had her turn around, walk out of the room, and go. But she was just like slowly backing up with her eyes deers in the headlight, just like okay. And then everyone's just like, so what are we gonna do today? Like they just pretend it never happened. For some reason, that's absolutely hilarious to me. And it's just a really creative way of getting out of a situation like that while also still being really funny. But yeah, like I said, the music in the show is so good. There's like these little cues and these little sounds and instruments that make you feel specific emotions based on what's going on in the show. And it's just either really relaxing, nostalgic, or intense, like with the jazz, like when it speeds up, or relaxing when the jazz is relaxing. Like I don't know what it is about this show, but the music is super memorable to me. I wanted to bring that up now because of that like one long instrument noise that was going on as she was walking out of the room. It would not have been that funny if that wasn't playing the way it was. I feel like that really added to the experience.
Yeah, definitely the show has good kind of sound design music, because you don't really expect it to have this good of a kind of soundtrack, just because it is kind of a slice of life for the most part. But like in the Sewer King episode, they have like actually really good kind of action music when they're like escaping from him, and you have kind of some nice dramatic music when like Helga's kind of sneaking around the place, and then you have that more like, this is awkward, so we're just going to use a kind of specific instrument to get across that like, okay, this is tense, but like we're not really trying to say anything here. We're just trying to have a fun moment. So I definitely liked the sound design of the show. But Greg, your thoughts on the music sound?
Yeah, no, I think the sound in the show overall is very good. I think in all the episodes I remember sort of watching and the ones that I sort of rewatched, it does a really good job of, letting the music set the tone for like the environment that they're in or sort of like the situation that they're in, much like in this episode, like it makes it seem sort of very tense at points or very sort of, action sort of packed. And, I think it really does a good job of just, I don't know, it does a really good job of creating a good atmosphere, especially like I always remember sort of like the city scenes or whenever they're on sort of the street, even if it's just, sort of the sounds of like the city and like the subway and stuff like that. It feels, from when I lived in the city and stuff and when I still am in the city, it really feels like they're in the environment that they're actually in the show. So it's interesting that they put, that much sort of effort into, the sound design of a kid's show in general.
Yeah, like even the theme song, the opening for every episode is actually really really memorable. Like having not watched this show, seen an episode in so long, just turning on an episode and hearing that, seeing the opening in terms of the animation of it, and then hearing the music, just is like, I remember like every single like beat of this music. It's just very memorable and really fits what the show is about. But yeah, I think that's it for the 3 episodes. So I suppose from here we'll get into just some kind of more kind of general talking points about the show, because there's not really a ton to like spoil necessarily with Hey Arnold, because there's only like maybe like a handful of episodes that like do anything of note, and even then, like probably the most notable like plot stuff is actually going to happen in the one piece of Hey Arnold that isn't out yet, and that's the TV movie that's coming later this year. And obviously the big plot point is just like, where are Arnold's parents? And as far as I'm aware, they only really address it in that like one, I think, kind of double length episode, like right towards the end of the show, the last episode production wise, but it isn't actually, they aired it kind of in a different order. And I don't remember the specifics all that well, but it's something along the lines of like, Hey Arnold's parents were like adventurers or something like that, and they're just like, they're lost or something like that is basically.
I can explain it.
Oh yeah, sure, go ahead. Yeah.
I know a bit more about it. Yeah, because I sadly know a lot about the show. So basically, Hey Arnold's parents met. Arnold's mother was a nurse in this. It's an indigenous country. I don't know where it is. It's a place. They never really specify. Arnold's dad was just a hiker, like a tourist, an adventurer, but she was a nurse for these people. And he falls down a cliff, breaks his ankle. She meets him. They fall in love. They have a baby. It's really sweet. The baby's born in the middle of a volcano erupting in the middle of an Aztec temple. I'm not even kidding. Arnold was born inside an Aztec temple with a volcano exploding. It was one of the craziest things. And then they go back home living with their grandparents, but there's a crazy illness. An illness that happened where Arnold was born in the same place, and so the mom had to go back. And the dad too. The dad also became like a nurse, or helped in some way. Like he helped them too. So they're like, we're gonna go back. We'll be back soon. And they never came back. For some reason. We don't know what happened to them. That is their story, pretty much. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say, but that's the thing. That's what the Jungle movie's going to figure out. They're going to go to the jungle. They're going to hopefully find his parents to see what the hell happened to them. So, yeah.
Like, to me, that's just so interesting that this show, like, has, like, 185, like, different individual kind of, like, plot things, even though they're not, like huge of note things, but that, like, there is a kind of actual plot going on that is going to be notable and interesting and emotional. It's interesting. It's like if SpongeBob just suddenly decided to have like, oh, there's this like really like emotional and like important 3-episode arc of SpongeBob. Like it's that sort of like equivalent here, that the show's gonna just kind of tonally have something kind of very different happen. So I'm actually kind of really interested to see how they do that, like going from just these random episodes that kind of cover completely different topics most of the time. Like they're going to have an episode where they play baseball and Arnold keeps hurting people when they play baseball. We're going to have issues on the subway, Ghost Train, Search for My Parents. Like it just feels like, wow, like the show doesn't do the big stuff all that often, but just the fact that it actually is eventually going to get there is very, very unique, and just speaks to the fact that, like, wow, they really cancelled this show just before the kind of very last bit. Is just really kind of obviously really frustrating and annoying, but like really kind of odd and kind of ironic that it is happening now, that it's returning with the one big bit. But Greg, what are your thoughts on the whole kind of bigger plot of like Arnold and his parents?
Yeah, no, that's always one of those things that you, especially as a kid, like you sort of, wonder about where his parents, or what is the story about where his parents, like why does he live with his grandparents? I mean, just his whole sort of, living arrangement in general is just one of those odd ones that you sort of, you sort of accept it in time when you sort of watch the show, but it's something that they don't bring up too often, but every once in a while they sort of mention it in passing. Like even the episode I mentioned with Arnold's hat, you can see, they do like a mini flashback of him getting the hat when he's a little sort of baby, and you can see that the hat sort of means so much to him because it's one of the things he has from his parents. So it's little things like that that sort of clue you into sort of wanting to know a bit more about Arnold's sort of history and sort of everything that sort of has happened with him up until this point. So it's definitely one of those interesting sort of sub sort of through line that the show does actually have, even if every episode for the most part is sort of like a one-off sort of thing. So it's definitely something that I think is pretty cool that the show has in sort of the back burner, and I guess now it'll actually eventually we'll get sort of the resolution hopefully to that sort of through line.
And I suppose, Kelly, do you have any other talking points more generally about the show?
I mean, I'm really excited for this movie. I cannot believe it's actually happening, and the fact that Craig Bartlett is all behind. They got Craig Bartlett to do it, and he's always wanted to do it. It's great. And of course I have to be skeptical, or not skeptical, but like fearful in the sense that the guy hasn't done anything in like 10 years. Like, this was like his only show. He did try to make another show on Cartoon Network, by the way. He had a pilot movie. I can't remember what it was called, but it was about the Old West. It had the same animation as Hey Arnold. It was about the Western. It was a Western, but it didn't get picked up. Cartoon Network didn't do it. They were like, nah, it's too adult. It's too adult for our children's channel. And then, like, to be fair, it had some adult themes. But anyway, back to Arnold. He hasn't done anything in a while, and it's Nickelodeon now. Like, ugh. You know what I mean? Nickelodeon is just like doing terrible right now. And I'm scared, but I'm just really I'm more hopeful than not, because I really trust that he knows these characters, and he knows what he wants to do with the story already. He already knew how he wanted to end it. And he had plans for this movie. The reason why this movie didn't happen, by the way, why the show was canceled and what happened, was that Nickelodeon gave him the opportunity to make a movie. But like that was like a really big project, and he had very little time to do it. So that's when the Hey Arnold movie came out in theaters. Completely bombed. It also got very bad reviews. It's not a bad movie, but it is disappointing. Like, it's not. It's really just kind of like an elongated Arnold episode with the big reveal that Helga reveals, you know what I mean? But like then it's retconned at the end, and you're like, oh, okay, so the show can keep going. So it's like it was a good. It wasn't a bad movie though. It was still a really good movie if you loved Hey Arnold. But the movie bombed, so they were like, yeah, never mind, we're gonna stop this. And he's just like, no, wait, I had all these plans. I had a spinoff for Helga when she's a teenager, and it would be on Teen Nick. They're like, no, we're not doing it. It's too adult. It's like Nick didn't realize we were growing up with this show. Like, of course people would have watched a Hey Arnold spinoff where Helga was a teenager dealing with a breakup with Arnold. You know what I mean? Like, of course people would have watched that and would have had swear words. You know what I mean? Like, of course people, because we would have been that age. You know what I mean? We would have started to have that, like, I don't know. That's just me ranting about Nickelodeon and how much it sucks. Even though it has all the best stuff for some reason. Like, how does Nickelodeon do this? As for the show itself, final points of the show itself. No, I just love the show. Also, wait, I wanted to bring up something about Helga Blabs it all. The episode's also just really particularly funny. Like the humor in this episode I thought was really spot on, particularly the run-on joke, which I think happens 3 or 4 times throughout the series, but people often forget about this joke. When Helga calls Phoebe and the takeout guy is like, "This is the wrong number, stop calling me," and hangs up the phone. He's like, "Oh, sorry." That happens multiple times throughout the show. She always calls that guy, and that guy is so sick of it. And it's like little things like that makes the show really funny. The little details, little run-on jokes here and there. Brainy, just with the thing, which actually leads to her going to the psychologist in the last season, which is really interesting. I just know a lot about the show. It's a great show. It just is. I don't really have any other points on it. I just love it so much.
Yeah, like I was looking at the Wikipedia page and I noticed that they mentioned that like they do occasionally show like reruns of this show, but it's on Teen Nick, and just that like when it initially aired, this was just a show on Nick, and now they consider it a teen show, even though the characters are like 9, and it speaks to like, yeah, definitely how things have changed. That for some reason this show is considered like a little too mature for like nowadays, like 8-9-year-olds, which is the age of the characters in the show, and that SpongeBob is pretty much the only thing that like we can show them. It just it's definitely a pretty baffling thing that like is probably for most people the ultimate reason why like Nick isn't doing so well, and that it's too kid focused now instead of like, hey, kids are actually pretty intelligent if you respect them a little bit, and like you could actually like do something interesting. But just the fact that they have put the whole show basically that, nope, it's one of our teen shows now, we'll keep it over here, is definitely very kind of weird to me. But Greg, do you have any thoughts on that, the show and where it is now?
Yeah, no, that is interesting. I didn't know that it was being aired on Teen Nick. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the times are always sort of changing, and sort of what we thought was sort of mature before, we thought, people sort of could handle, has definitely sort of, changed in general. I think just our whole sort of mentality towards shows has sort of, skewed one way or the other. I mean, I don't know. It seems like sometimes there are definitely, certain shows, and of course we always sort of mention Avatar as one of them, but, there are shows that they do sort of, geared towards, mature or younger sort of audience, however you sort of want to think about it. And I don't know, I think it's just something that it depends on the people specifically, sort of if they sort of like those shows and whatnot. But no, I think this is definitely it's one of those sort of classic sort of type of shows that you can sort of even as an older person, with us being our age, can sort of go back to and enjoy it for what it was. Even if you sort of, don't have as much sort of nostalgia for it, you can still sort of find good things to sort of pick out of it from various sort of episodes. So I don't know, for me, it's one of those shows I always, will enjoy, I think.
Definitely. But I guess, Greg, do you have any final talking points about the show?
No, I mean, it's a great show. I mean, it has, a bunch of episodes. It has, various sort of, mini sort of arc episodes, and there's definitely, a bunch of episodes that you can sort of watch as a sort of a standalone thing, which I think is, is pretty good. I mean, a lot of the kids-oriented shows, are sort of standalone, but I think this show sort of stands out with sort of the messages that it has that are, pretty positive for kids, and it has a lot that you sort of can take away from it, which I think is, one of the pluses of the show.
And Kelly, do you have any final talking points?
I mean, I could talk about the show forever, but so I just as for talking points in general about the show, not really, other than I also wanted to mention that we do get a mention of Arnold's parents earlier in the season in an episode called Parents' Day, where, he wants to know more about his parents, but his grandfather won't tell him. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, they were at this circus, it was great, and this happened or whatever, right? And then Arnold's like, okay, I want the truth now, Grandpa. And then he explains the truth that the parents went away in a plane and never came back. But then later in the show, you get the whole explanation. So we were getting hints about his parents as the show went on. It's just the end of the show, the last episode that was in the production, that was the last one in canon, where we figure out everything. Arnold finds the map. He finds the map in a secret pocket in the journal to where the parents probably are. He runs off and he says, "Grandpa, I found a map." And then the episode ends and you're like, it's like, this is what the Jungle movie was supposed to be. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, it's so frustrating. And it will be. It will be. So here's the thing. If you liked Arnold when you were a kid, but you didn't quite 100% get into it, or if you're interested based on what we've been discussing and like what the show is about or whatever, I suggest watching it. I just do. I think you should watch it. There might be some episodes that are less interesting than others. There's this one infamous episode that the creator said, "I regret making it. It was a really bad idea, and it was the most like, what's the word? Negative episode? Like, no, negative's not the right word. I'm sorry. There's a word for it. It's just not good, and not good. Not mean like not good in quality wise, but like it had such a negative message. It had such a negativity to it that he was like, yeah, that episode did not turn out the way I had wanted. I completely regret making it. I hate it. It's this episode where Arnold finds out one of his friends has a bunny pajamas or whatever, and like he promises not to tell anybody. He accidentally tells someone. They humiliate Arnold in front of the whole town, and the episode just ends like with Arnold being humiliated, and it was just like a really weird, unfun episode, and to the point where the guy never made the character again. Craig Bartlett never brought that guy back. He completely erased him from the show's canon and like pretended it never happened, which is really funny. But so don't watch that one. But if you are interested in what we're saying, or you've seen the show and you could watch it, catch up on it, really get the good stuff. And then watch the movie, the Jungle movie, and let's hope it doesn't suck, because that would really stink if it wasn't good. But I have faith. I have faith, but I recognize it could also be pretty bad, particularly with the animation. We're going to have to see what they do with the animation. I'm pretty much done with my thoughts. I really like this show.
Yeah, like I think in terms of recommending this show, it's definitely one of those things where like, yeah, I think it's a good enough show to like just start at episode 1 and go through. But if you do maybe just want to prepare yourself for the movie, then there's probably like at least a bunch of episodes that you probably should see, just so you know the kind of key points. So I'd say with this is probably one of those cases of just like look through the episode lists, see which like titles, which descriptions stand out. Because they're only 11-minute episodes, because it's slice of life, it's pretty clear what each episode is about based on like a one-sentence description. So that's probably like roughly the way to go through it. Like especially if you remember the show a lot from having watched it when you were younger, that's probably the best way to do it. That like you just episodes that kind of come to mind as being like, I remember that as episode, it was fun. Watch that and kind of go through the season like that. Because it to me seems like the sort of show that like this would be a kind of, it'd be fun, but I think it'd eventually be a little kind of time consuming to just kind of like marathon this entire show, even though the episodes are like short and easy to watch.
True.
Like this many episodes that don't really kind of link together or anything like that could be frustrating, but again, it's better than like modern shows with this format. Hey Arnold is much better. But Greg, any final thoughts? Recommendations for how people would maybe go back and like relook at this show, rewatch it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend people watch it for sure. As far as how to go back and watch it, I don't know. I mean, there's a couple places where you can find lists of sort of like best episodes and stuff like that. I mean, I think that's where I went to find some of my episodes, besides the ones that I could remember off the top. So I definitely would search around and sort of, pick and choose probably some episodes, because there is a lot. So you probably don't necessarily have to watch, sort of a whole thing if you're trying to sort of get the best for when the movie comes out. So I would probably go to the list route. But, anything you do sort of watch from the show, you'll probably enjoy regardless, I would think.
But yeah, that's our kind of look back on Hey Arnold as our listener suggestion for this time out. So yeah, I think I have the next show pick, but we're probably going to be doing like taking a little break from the Movers podcast just for a couple of weeks, because obviously next week on the podcast we're going to be doing Avatar Online podcast, where we review Beginnings Part 2. I chose that last time out for the Korra rewatch. That's obviously my favorite episode, so I'm excited to review that next week. But then the following week, what we're going to be doing is, because we now have the kind of soundboard programs and stuff like that, so we can play music and clips during the actual recording of the podcast and we can all hear it. We can now do a kind of podcast we've sort of been thinking about planning for a while, and that is our top 5 Avatar: The Last Airbender music list. So this is our top 5 pieces from the ATLA soundtrack, and we'll be each doing our individual lists, and we'll play some of the music as well on that podcast. So it should be pretty fun to go through that. That's in 2 weeks' time. It's a regular episode for next week for Beginnings Part 2. And then the following week after that, we'll probably get back to the Movers podcast. But yeah, that's the rough schedule for what's coming up next. But yeah, that has been the Movers podcast for Hey Arnold. It's been myself, Greg, and Kelly. Thanks for listening to this podcast, and bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.